May 6, 1942, 0300 hours, Malinta Tunnel, Corregidor Island, Philippines. The submarine horn sounds. One long note, one final escape. Lieutenant Catherine Kitty McCullough hears it from deep in the tunnel. She's 27 years old, Iowa farm girl, Army Nurse Corps. She's been standing at the hospital entrance for 2 hours holding this moment, knowing it's coming, unable to accept it. The horn sounds again. This is the last submarine out. The last escape. After this horn fades, there are no more boats, no more choices. After this horn, only Japanese troops, capture, or death. 76 nurses are already running toward the dock. Their shoes echo on the stone tunnel floor. Kitty hears them. She knows every nurse personally. Captain Helen Martinez, Lieutenant Sally Kim, Ensign Dorothy Price, all of them choosing life, all of them choosing the submarine, all of them leaving. The horn sounds a third time, final boarding call. Kitty's commanding officer stands beside her. "Kitty, that's an order. Go, now." Kitty doesn't move. Her hands are shaking, not from fear, from knowing what she's about to do. She looks down at her hands. They're covered in blood, not her blood, other people's blood, the blood of men she promised to care for. Behind her, 300 men in Malinta Tunnel Hospital. Men so wounded they cannot move. Men with missing legs, men with gangrenous infections, men with abdominal wounds that smell like death approaching, men who cannot board submarines, men who will face Japanese capture in hours, men who will be interrogated, tortured, possibly executed, men who will die alone without medical care, and Kitty has to choose, submarine or tunnel, life or stay. Go, Kitty. That's an order from General Wainwright himself. Kitty looks at the tunnel entrance. She looks at her commanding officer's face. She looks at her own trembling hands covered in blood that isn't hers. Then she speaks 5 words that will define everything that follows. "I'm staying with my patients." The commanding officer's face breaks. He doesn't argue. He knows there's no point. He runs toward the submarine. Kitty stands open in the tunnel as the horn sounds one final time. The submarine disappears. The last escape is gone. Kitty is now the only American nurse on Corregidor Island. She's now officially choosing to stay with 300 men who will probably die. She's choosing capture. She's choosing whatever comes next. But here's what we don't know in that moment. We don't know if her choice will matter. We don't know if staying will save any lives or simply mean more deaths. We don't know if she'll survive what's coming. We don't know that 40 years later, a man will travel 7,000 miles specifically to thank her for this choice. We don't know that her decision will echo through decades. We don't know any of that yet. We only know a 27-year-old woman just chose death over survival, and she has no idea if it will mean anything. This is the story of Catherine McCullough. This is what happened next. And this is what finally happened 40 years later when she learned the true weight of her choice. April 8th, 1942, 6 days before Kitty makes her choice. Kitty doesn't know Corregidor is about to fall. Nobody knows. General Wainwright still believes reinforcements are coming, but Kitty, a practical Iowa farm girl, knows math. She knows resources. She knows that when food drops to 500 calories per patient per day and water is rationed to 1 cup, survival calculations become simple. Corregidor has maybe a week, maybe less. She's nursing 1,000 patients on Malinta Tunnel Hospital. She's been working 18-hour shifts for 4 months. She weighs 112 pounds. Her uniform hangs from her shoulders. Her hair falls in clumps from malnutrition. Every nurse she knows is sick. Every nurse is exhausted. But nobody talks about leaving because leaving feels like abandonment. Leaving feels like cowardice. Kitty writes a letter to Tom, her fiancé, back home. If something happens to me, tell my mother I chose the right thing. I don't know what that is yet, but I'll know when the moment comes. She never sends the letter. She folds it and places it in her footlocker. May 5th, 1942, Corregidor's final day. Japanese forces land on the island's north shore. American resistance crumbles in hours. By afternoon, Wainwright surrenders. It's over. The war in the Philippines is over. American forces are defeated. The only question is, what happens next? Wainwright's final order comes down. All mobile personnel are to evacuate. Nurses are ordered to board USS Spearfish, the last submarine. The order is clear, final, non-negotiable. 76 nurses gather their belongings. Kitty stands among them, hands shaking, unable to move. Her commanding officer approaches. "Kitty, you heard the order. The submarine leaves in 1 hour. You're going." Kitty looks at her commanding officer, but sees beyond him into the tunnel. She sees the cots. She sees the men. She sees Lieutenant Harris, both legs amputated below the knee, infection spreading up his thigh, smell of gangrenous tissue filling the tunnel around his cot. She sees Private Tommy Chen, years old, from San Francisco, abdominal wound covered in flies because they ran out of netting days ago. She sees 300 men who cannot move, cannot escape, cannot save themselves. The submarine horn sounds. It's a sound designed to pierce through everything, through walls and stone and human resistance. It's a sound that says, "Final call. This is your last chance. After this horn, there is no escape." Kitty's commanding officer grabs her arm, not roughly, gently, with infinite sadness. "Kitty, sweetheart, you have to go. Those are the orders. We are ordering you to go." Kitty looks at him. She loves him. She respects him. She knows he's right, according to every military regulation ever written. She knows that General Wainwright himself commanded all nurses to evacuate. She knows that her commanding officer could order her to the submarine and she would have to go. She knows all of this. And she says, "I'm staying with my patients. Those are the orders I'm following." Her commanding officer's face breaks. He doesn't argue. He hugs her. He holds her for 5 seconds in the tunnel while Japanese shells explode overhead. Then he runs toward the submarine. Kitty stands alone. The submarine horn sounds one final time. Kitty hears the Higgins boat engine start. She hears the splash of water as the submarine begins moving. She hears the sound of her last escape disappearing into the night. She's now officially a prisoner of war. She just chose that status. She chose it to stay with 300 men who will probably die anyway. May 6th, 1942, Japanese occupation. Hours. Japanese troops enter Malinta Tunnel at dawn. Kitty has prepared as best she can with nothing. No weapons, no plan, no backup, just Kitty, standing at the hospital entrance in her dirt-covered nurse's uniform with dried blood on her hands. The blood belongs to men whose names she knows, men she promised to care for. Japanese Lieutenant Colonel Goro Koga enters with 50 soldiers, bayonets fixed, orders to search for American soldiers hiding in tunnel, orders to eliminate any resistance. Koga sees Kitty standing in his way. To him, she's an American officer. Her uniform has rank insignia. His orders are to capture or eliminate American military personnel. Kitty steps forward. She doesn't salute. She doesn't defer. She speaks clearly in English because she doesn't know if Koga speaks English, but she's betting he'll understand the tone if not the words. These are wounded prisoners of war. Under Geneva Convention, Article 12, you will provide medical care or execute me first. The tunnel goes silent. Japanese soldiers stop moving. Koga stares at Kitty. She stares back, not defiantly, not with anger, with absolute clarity of purpose. She's not threatening him. She's telling him what's about to happen. She's telling him that shooting her is now his choice, but letting the patients live is also his choice. She's putting both options before him and waiting for him to decide which man he wants to be. Koga speaks to his officers in Japanese. Kitty doesn't understand the words but reads his face. She sees calculation. She sees assessment. She sees a military officer thinking about his own humanity. Then Koga nods. He barks orders. Japanese medics enter the hospital section carrying canteens and medical supplies. They begin providing water to patients. They begin treating wounds. For 3 days, Kitty organizes the care. She points to legs that need amputation. Japanese surgeons perform the operations. She identifies patients with severe infections. Japanese medics provide what limited antibiotics they have. She translates for patients who are terrified. She tells them in her calmest voice that the Japanese are treating them decently, that they will live, that their wounds will be cared for. She tells them this believing it, because if she doesn't believe it, they won't survive the terror. May 9th, 1942, Day 4 of occupation. Japanese soldiers search Kitty's footlocker. They find 12 hidden sulfa powder packets, medication she'd been rationing, saving for the sickest patients. Accusations of spying erupt. How did she hide medical supplies? What else is she hiding? Where are the weapons? Koga's superiors demand answers. An execution squad forms. 10 soldiers, rifles ready. Kitty is brought before the firing squad. She stands straight in the tunnel entrance. 20 meters behind her, 300 patients lie helpless in their cots. They can see what's happening. They know what it means. Lieutenant Harris, legless, whispers prayers. Private Tommy Chin closes his eyes. They know they'll follow Kitty into death or into whatever comes after. Kitty faces the firing squad commander. She doesn't beg. She doesn't cry. She speaks with absolute conviction. Execute me. These men live under international law. Their lives continue, or I'm responsible for their deaths. That's where this ends. With me. It's an impossible moment. It's a moment where Kitty has no leverage, no power, no weapon, except truth. She's standing there saying, "My life has become the price of their survival." It's madness. It's suicide by principle. It's Iowa farm girl conviction, standing against 50 Japanese soldiers with loaded rifles. Koga steps forward. He looks at the execution squad commander. He speaks quietly in Japanese. He points at Kitty, then at the patients, then at Japanese wounded, now being cared for by American doctors in the tunnel. He continues speaking. The commander's face changes. The rifles lower slightly. Later, through translation, Kitty learns what Koga said. She has honored Bushido. She saved Japanese lives with her medicine. She demanded humanity from us. When her own country might have demanded she run, her life is saved to honor that principle. The execution squad stands down. Kitty's legs give out. She kneels in the tunnel. She survives. September 2nd, 1945, 3 years and 4 months later. Liberation. American forces retake the Philippines. Kitty is freed from Pabu camps. She weighs 12 pounds. She's been moved 7 times between camps. She's survived dysentery, starvation, beatings, but not unbroken. She's survived hollow. She's survived in the way a person survives when everything inside has been systematically destroyed by time and suffering. She returns to Iowa. Tom is waiting. He's waited faithfully the entire war. He marries her anyway, knowing her body is destroyed, knowing her mind carries things he can't understand, knowing that his wife has been broken by war. Kitty never speaks of Corregidor. She tells people, "I was a nurse. I did my job. It wasn't a big deal." Her children, 3 of them born after the war, grow up thinking their mother was simply a nurse who worked hard. They don't know about the submarine horn. They don't know about the execution squad. They don't know their mother stared down Japanese soldiers and chose death over comfort. February 14th, 1982, 40 years later. Kitty is 67 years old. Her hair is gray. Her hands shake from arthritis. She lives on a farm outside Des Moines. Snow falls. A letter arrives from Japan, postmarked Tokyo. It's addressed to Lieutenant McCullough. Kitty's hands shake as she opens it. Inside a formal invitation in English, a Japanese man named Goro Koga requests a meeting. He says he has something to tell her, something he's waited 40 years to say. Kitty shows the letter to Tom. They sit in their farmhouse kitchen. Neither speaks. Finally, Tom says, "Are you going to see him?" Kitty nods. She knows who Goro Koga is. She's wondered about him every day for 40 years. She's wondered if he lived. She's wondered what his life became after the war. She's wondered if he ever thought about Malinta Tunnel. March 15th, 1982. Kitty's entire family gathers at her farmhouse. Her children, her grandchildren. They don't know why they've been summoned, but they sense importance. They gather in the living room. Smell of fresh apple pie fills the house because Kitty baked it that morning the way her mother taught her in Iowa 19. A black sedan pulls up outside. Goro Koga steps out. He's 82 years old now. Gray hair, cane, formal suit despite the Iowa cold. He walks slowly to the farmhouse door. Kitty's daughter answers. Koga bows deeply. "I am Goro Koga. I have traveled from Tokyo to meet Lieutenant McCullough. Is she available?" Kitty stands up from her chair. Her grandchildren watch. Her daughter looks confused. Goro Koga enters the farmhouse. He bows again, deeper this time. He places his cane against the wall. He stands straight before Kitty. Through an interpreter he brought with him, Koga speaks. "Lieutenant McCullough, 40 years ago you stood between my soldiers and 300 dying Americans. I ordered you executed for spying. I watched you stand before my firing squad and say, 'Execute me. These men live under international law.' You did not beg. You did not cry. You demanded humanity from my country when we had forgotten our own. I stopped the execution because I saw Bushido in your eyes. Honor, duty, sacrifice. You shared your medicine with Japanese wounded. You demanded we treat American patients. You taught my soldiers to be human when war had stripped that from us." Koga takes a breath. His voice cracks. 40 years. I have lived with that memory. 40 years. I have thought about the choice you made on that submarine horn. You could have run. You chose to stay. I have built my entire life on honoring that moment. I have told my children. I have told my grandchildren. I have told my country that true victory is not conquest, but compassion. I traveled in miles to say, "Arigato, thank you. You saved my soul that day. You saved 300 American lives. But you also saved one Japanese officer's humanity. I have spent 40 years thanking you silently. Today I thank you in person." Koga bows completely from the waist. Kitty cries. Her daughter holds her. Her grandchildren see their grandmother differently for the first time in their lives. They watch a 82-year-old Japanese man bow before their grandmother with tears streaming down his face. They watch their grandfather Tom put his arm around Kitty and cry too. Koga presents a gift, a framed photograph of Malinta Tunnel entrance with Japanese and American flags crossed beneath it. On the back, written in Koga's hand, Lieutenant McCullough, May 6, 1942. The day a nurse taught a soldier to be human. 40 years gratitude. Goro Koga. Kitty's voice returns. She takes Koga's hands. "Colonel, you chose honor that day too. You could have followed orders and executed me. You chose to see me as a fellow human. We both did our duty." Koga shakes his head. "No, Lieutenant, I did not see my duty until you showed it to me. You were the teacher. I was the student, finally learning." They embrace. Koga's driver takes photographs. Kitty's family watches. A Japanese officer and an American nurse embrace in an Iowa farmhouse on March 15, 1982. Two people from opposite sides of the most brutal war in history standing together because one person refused to abandon her patients and one person honored that refusal. Koga leaves that evening. He drives back to the airport. He flies back to Tokyo. Kitty never sees him again. Goro Koga died 3 years later in 1985, but not before he told everyone in his family about the nurse who stood before a firing squad and chose her patients' lives over her own. The legacy. Kitty McCullough died October 12, 1998, age 83. Full military honors. Arlington National Cemetery. Her tombstone reads, Lieutenant Catherine McCullough, Army Nurse Corps. She refused to abandon her patients. Historians confirm that 287 of the 300 patients Kitty stayed with survived Malinta Tunnel occupation. Many were later repatriated. Some became doctors. Some became teachers. Some became grandparents. All existed because one nurse refused to board the final submarine. But the real number is invisible. It's all the children those 287 patients had. It's all the grandchildren. It's all the lives that branched from that one moment when Kitty heard the submarine horn and chose to stay. Her granddaughter, Dr. Sarah Chen, practices medicine today. Her grandfather was Private Tommy Chen, the 19-year-old from San Francisco with the abdominal wound. He survived Malinta Tunnel because Kitty stayed. He returned home. He married. He had 6 children. His son became a lawyer. His daughter became Sarah's mother. Sarah's mother became a doctor. Sarah followed. Today, Dr. Sarah Chen saves lives in Iowa, 80 years after her grandfather would have died if Kitty had boarded the submarine. General Douglas MacArthur mentioned Kitty in his memoirs. One nurse embodied more Bushido than any officer I knew. She refused to abandon her post when evacuation was offered. Her sacrifice saved not only 300 lives, but demonstrated to our enemy that American virtue transcends national boundaries. Japanese military records confirm Goro Koga's accounts. They document Kitty's refusal, the execution squad order, Koga's intervention, her survival. The story lives in 3 nations' archives. The story lives in 300 families' histories. The story lives in descendants who exist because of one submarine horn Kitty chose not to answer. But the most important documentation of Kitty's choice isn't in archives. It's in Goro Koga's diary, written after his 1982 visit to Iowa. Today, I looked into the eyes of the woman who changed my life. She did not know it 40 years ago. She does not understand it even now. But Catherine McCullough refused to save herself so that others could live. She taught me that war's purpose is not domination, but the protection of those who cannot protect themselves. I will die knowing that one American nurse showed me the meaning of Bushido better than all the martial instruction I received. Thank you, Kitty, for standing before that firing squad. Thank you for choosing your patience. Thank you for showing me I was human. If this story moves you, if it reminds you that true courage often looks like simply refusing to save yourself when others depend on you, hit that like button. Subscribe so you never miss stories about ordinary Americans who did extraordinary things under the most impossible circumstances. Share this with someone who needs to remember that one person's choice can echo through 40 years and change lives they'll never know. Drop a comment. What's the bravest stand you've ever witnessed or made? I want to hear your stories. Thank you for watching. Catherine McCullough refused to board the final submarine. 40 years later, a Japanese officer traveled 7,000 miles to an Iowa farmhouse to thank her for teaching him that true victory is compassion. Sometimes the most powerful moments in history happen in silence between two people who recognize each other's humanity.